This is Stonefruit and Alfakitty on the Conspiracy Couch with the Conspiracy Cats, who may be joining us later. And we want to give you our top 20-ish conspiracy theories and talk a lot of fascinating, funky nonsense about each one. Where should we jump in, Alfakitty?
Well, we've got a lot to cover. It's doubtful that we can hit it all in one session, but I think our sitting here does beg the question, how the hell did we meet?
We met in the student ghetto of UC Berkeley, south of campus, in a tenement run by a famous Persian slumlord, Riza Valeri.
Reza Valier.
We called it Rizaville.
Reza Palace.
And when I went to complain to the student lawyer, she expressed her admiration and amazement at what she called the perpetual motion machine he was able to keep in motion with his dozens of horrific rental properties throughout the East Bay.
Mm-hmm. The kitchen was completely unusable. The bathrooms backed up raw sewage, and it was the only place that we could afford. And therefore we were thrown together only to find out
that we had a lot of friends in common, that we both went to the Peace School where Obama went to, that we had a lot about Hawaiian connections in common.
You left when I went to Hawaii, and then I left when you went back.
Indeed.
And so, Mod Bench, can you explain that part?
Right. Punahou is very cliquey and
just a little bit
full of social hierarchy, and how hip you are or what clique you belong to is determined in large part by what bench you sit at on campus.
Mm-hmm. I had protection because my cousins were the Sakaguchis and they were half Japanese, and me being a very white Halle girl and completely clueless as to the ways of the 13 plus club, I had to find my way through the magnetism of the weirdos.
Yes.
And you evidently were in the same weirdo club, and where you left off when you got spring cleaned is where I took up. And when I got spring cleaned, we realized that we had all these friends in common.
That's right, Alfakitty.
And we're friends with these fuckers until this day.
The mod bench was mods and some punkers and goths.
New wavers, new romantics.
New wavers, new row. And she basically, the seat I left vacant, she kept warm for a year. And then Punahou did not accept me back, which is good because I graduated from public school, which is a very important thing in Hawaii. Where are you in grad? Public or private? Now I could answer depending on what people want to hear.
Otherwise people say, when you say you went to Punahou, they go, Punahou.
I had a friend who is a pharmaceutical executive graduated from Punahou. He was at some conference on the mainland, and he met a Kama Aina person from Hawaii, and she asked the all-important question, where are you in grad? And he said, Punahou. And she said, they're in their 40s by now. She goes, fucking Punahou. Turns on her heels and leaves. She just met my friend, who's a nice guy.
Who was it?
Dave Schultz.
Oh, poor Dave.
85.
Huh.
So let's jump into the conspiracy list that we have. What do you want to start off with, Alfakitty?
Well, first of all, we hail from Gen X. We're both 69ers. The last respectable year.
On the right side of the Great Divide.
Yeah. And that definitely, influences our perspective on these particular matters. So I think that, Gen X has done a lot of work where the generations behind us are not necessarily as work productive or focused. We're definitely being utilized for our work ethic behind our parents' generation, because I'm actually the child of somebody that's older than the boomers. She was boomer plus.
And we have a lot of influence from punk, and not the music, not just the fashion, not it's
the culture.
The culture, the DIY aesthetic, the do-it-yourself aesthetic. So when we get into something, we go all in on research and doing as much of it as we can ourselves, and that applies to research into conspiracy theories.
But sometimes it can make you a little crazy, and it has. And we've both hit walls in that area, and lived to tell the tale.
Thank you, Kalala Valley and the Napali Coast, which saved me when I realized 911 was an inside job.
Thank you to you, who, talked me out of 2 years of complete conspiranoia, back in 03, 04, 05. Well, actually, it wasn't 2 years. It was like 4 years.
Yeah.
My cousin Ed helped me with the first 2. I think you helped me with the next 2.
Yeah.
You saw helicopters, and they were threatening presence for you.
Well, let's just jump right into number 1, 9/11.
Yeah.
For the first year after 9/11, I believe the official conspiracy theory. If you arm, train, and fund a monster, you should not be surprised that he acts monstrously. Osama bin Laden. And then a year later, my ex-wife and I were walking around University of Hawaii campus, and there was some butcher paper hung on the campus center walls. And people were allowed to write their sentiments, and I assumed that they would all be, "Let's go kill us some sand and words."
Oh,
Or
in Hawaii, in democratic Hawaii, hello.
Or they're in our thoughts and prayers. Both equally superficial reactions to the geopolitical event of 9/11, the televisual spectacular. And my wife, she waved me back and pointed at this one writing, and it said the Bush and bin Laden family had made millions together through the Carlyle Private Equity Group.
Which I got interviewed by when I went to apply at Wharton. I got interviewed by a recent Carlisle inductee who was a Wharton grad, and he was the rudest son of a bitch ever. He, first of all, didn't respect that I had just had ankle surgery and walked like 10 times faster than me down a hallway, up a set of stairs, and into like the hottest little annex room possible.
Damn, it's good to be a banker.
And, I'm wearing a suit. It's in the middle of August. It was hell. And needless to say, I did not get into Wharton that year. So a little bit bitter, but coming back to 9/11, definite inside job. Definitely usury of the bin Ladens by the Bushes, who have, Christmased together in years past. And there are pictures of them actually hanging out and breaking bread together.
And about 50 or 60 bin Ladens were put out of the United States on a private jet.
Even while all the other planes were grounded.
Yeah. And their investment in the Carlyle Group was only a few million, but it was an attempt to curry favor with what other people have called the Bush family evil empire. And after I read that sentence, I researched it 12 hours a day for 2 months, would wake up sopping wet, coated with sweat due to the stress. And
as did my cousin.
And when I was in peak 9/11 research, I could have rattled off 50 anomalies. If you want to look, and I would, you must understand 9/11 was an inside job, and here are the anomalies. And I was making myself a major pain in the ass to everyone I met, because that's all I wanted to talk about for about a year and a half.
That's so rare.
But then I realized I was very unpleasant to be around, and just said World Trade Center 7.
Yep.
Which wasn't hit by a plane.
And it was a short building, and it was short and flat, and it had no reason to implode.
It wasn't that short. It was 37 stories. It would have been the tallest building in something like 30 states.
Shit, really?
Yeah, it's a big building.
It looked tiny compared to those tiny in Manhattan.
but it wasn't hit by a plane. It had a small fire, and even the firemen were saying, "It's going to come down. You got to get out of here." And the owner, Silverstein, Larry Silverstein, he said, "And we made the decision to pull it."
Huh.
Which some people say pull is one of the slang for controlled demolition.
And it had to be controlled demolition because of all of the particles of
nanothermite, including what went into Diana Ross. No. Who's that disco queen?
Yeah.
Not Diana Ross.
The other one? Gloria Gaynor?
No. Another one.
Tell me where you're going with this so that
Well, she had an apartment in Lower Manhattan, and
she got
nanothermite was all over her apartment, and she died of cancer a couple of years later.
Yeah, as did all the dogs who helped.
But that's not the most important thing. Look at the liquid molten steel that was there for weeks.
The insurance policies that were just, billions and billions of
got covered
reinsurance.
Twice for 2 incidents.
Yeah.
And it was slated for demolition. There was a period of a few days or a few weeks when everything was down, and that would have been a good time.
When the elevators were closed.
The elevators
so there
were
was
closed.
Limited access for like 2 weeks prior to the actual incident.
Which would have been a great time for the Israelis to put in the controlled demolition. I think the Israelis did the controlled demolition and perhaps a suitcase nuke and the identity theft because 7 of the hijackers were still alive. And there's just so many anomalies. I don't even remember it because I felt like I researched it and
you were done.
I was done. I didn't want to go insane. But if you really want to look at it, internet, then go to Engineers.
There's no way.
Engineers for 9/11 Truth is a good place to start.
Yeah.
There's a theologian from Claremont McKenna College, David Griffith, I think, who wrote a couple books on it. Start there, do your own research, and you will soon realize that 9/11 was a watershed moment because the military-industrial complex had lost communism as an enemy, and they needed a new enemy.
Yeah. So basically, we put Afghan as the interim target, or Afghanistan as the interim target for, to be the foil for what would then become Iran, right? Or Iraq.
Correct.
Iraq. And the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq had nothing to do with us having issues with the Afghanis. And, the hatred just got redirected to where we wanted to start the war.
And prior to 9/11, the American ambassador to Afghanistan told the Taliban that accept our deal for us to come in and get the Caspian Basin oil and natural gas. We will shower you with gold or we will shower you with bombs, is what she told them prior to 9/11. And people need to look at also the Project for a New American Century manifesto prior to the appointment.
Wait a minute, be careful with anything that has the word manifesto in the title.
I love manifestos.
I know you do, but they reduce credibility. So.
I love polemicism. But this is a very important manifesto because it was all of the A-team neoconservatives. Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, Francis Fukuyama.
Cheney's just Darth.
Bill Kristol, just all of them. And they wanted to be able to fight and win 2 major wars simultaneously. They wanted what they called...
Cheney was a greedy bastard.
Yeah.
Still is. He took somebody else's heart, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, and he shot his friend in the face.
and his friend had to apologize. Yeah, that was rich. Okay.
But these guys, these neocons, before the Supreme Court appointed W. President, they said that they wanted all these changes in the military, what they called a revolution in military affairs, to take place. But unless there was, quote, a new Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, which brings us to the next one then.
It would be difficult to pull off.
Yep.
And Bush, in his diary that night, said that we've had our new Pearl Harbor.
He wrote a diary, a wedding crayon.
Toothpaste.
Finger paint.
Finger paint. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, because the look on his face when he was interrupted in that little kindergarten classroom setting
in
that
Florida.
morning.
Reading My Pet Goat.
Yeah, he does
Upside down.
He does not look surprised that an aide comes in and tells him that the World Trade Centers came down.
Why did the Secret Service not spirit him away as soon as they learned about it?
Yeah, they let him just continue and finish the book.
And the Pentagon. This new congresswoman that's crazy, the right-winger, what's her name?
I forget her name. She's the one that's causing the problems right now.
She said that a plane didn't hit the Pentagon, and that means she's crazy. She's crazy for a lot of other reasons. I don't believe a plane hit the Pentagon.
No, there was no plane-sized crash in the Pentagon.
Where was the wreckage? Why was the hole in the Pentagon so small? It
didn't have no room for wings.
How did an engine get all the way through 5 layers
at ground level into
the courtyard?
They'd have to land the plane. Everybody would see it. There would be film footage of it from everywhere. And there was nothing.
There's one little camera for the parking lot.
Yeah, that's
and it just shows a little flash. And if we were to believe it was a plane, it made a corkscrew fighter ace dive into it and was about 5 feet above the ground and hit the Pentagon. When these guys are learning flight school in Florida, partying with hookers. These devout Taliban are partying with strippers and doing coke, and they don't want to bother to learn how to land.
Yeah, let alone corkscrew a high, a multi-billion-dollar military aircraft that would require to make that small of a hole.
And Pennsylvania, it was...
I have no idea what that one's about.
Possibly going to escape, and people were going to live to tell the tale. And there was people that said a Learjet type of small private jet was around and might have shot it down.
Oh, and all of the stuff was cleaned up like that day.
Yeah,
it was like cordoned off. It was out in a woodsy area. Nobody was allowed to come in and take photos of the wreckage, and the wreckage was whisked away, as was all the other wreckage from downtown, sent over on ferries to Staten Island, where it was come through.
The structural steel was taken right away.
Yeah, within a day or two. And
sold to China. There was no forensic analysis of what structural steel was left. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of tons of structural steel that just evaporated.
Or liquefied. Remember, there was liquid steel.
And if you chop a tree right here, it's going to fall like that.
Yeah, there's no way that huge tall buildings come in on their own imprint.
And you can see the squibs just below the descending cloud, pyroclastic cloud of destruction. And
what's a squib?
Squib is the controlled demolition charges. And you see them bursting at each floor.
Yeah, you do.
Just beneath it.
Yeah, and creating a cloud of smoke, even while people are diving out of windows, and we lost.
Yeah, and if it's so
87.
And if it's so hot there, why are people leaning out of the window, looking down at the ground? The two French filmmakers, the Godet brothers, were doing a documentary on the year in the life of a probation fireman. And they were in the ladder that was first to respond. They were out for an odor of gas call. And Godot is looking at the odor of gas.
Did they have to wait for him?
What?
Godot.
She's witty, this one. They're looking at a sewer cap for the odor of gas, and they hear, and he puts his camera up to the sky, and he catches the first plane hitting. And so they're first to respond. And those firemen, when they helped what they could, and then reinforcements arrived, and then they're just processing it in shock, and they say, it was like a controlled demolition. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, they all say that in their accent.
Yeah.
I was at home on my way to work. I was late for work in San Francisco, and we lost colleagues that were on the bond trading floor at Cantor Fitzgerald. Credit Suisse, who I worked for at the time, was based in Manhattan, and they were all shook up. And yeah, a classmate of ours was at the Windows of the World, who was a pastry chef and happened to be there early that morning.
R.I.P. Heather Ho.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was squatting in a treehouse on a ridge above the University of Hawaii.
In '01?
A treehouse?
Well, no, I know the treehouse, but I thought you were in the treehouse much later than that.
No, it was that day. Because I turned on the radio and listened to the college radio station, and they said, our heart's with everybody for this horrible tragedy and what's going on. And right about that time, one of my best friends walked the 15 steep minutes up from the street to my little squat under a tree.
Just to tell you?
Just to tell me.
Because you needed... because this was pre-digital.
Pre-digital.
This is an analog notification.
Yeah, very much so. And I stayed up there that whole day. So I did not experience watching TV of the thing over and over and over.
The second hit, I'm like, I'm not going to work. And I called my business partner. I'm like, are you watching this? And we both watched it together on the phone. And there were bomb threats in San Francisco at the building where I worked, which was right across the street from the tallest one at the time before Salesforce came in and fucked it up. But 555 California is, the investment banker building that goes up 44 floors.
Mm-hmm.
Goldman Sachs is at the top, and I was called in for like a morning interview one time where we were there at sunrise for a fucking interview. But my building was across the street, half that size. And I was afraid that they were going to bomb, all Wall Street firms. I didn't know whether it was specific to New York City, because there were bomb threats in all sorts of areas of the country. And they told us, you can either come in or don't come in. But, either way, do what you want to do. I'm like, I'm not fucking going into San Francisco today. I'm staying right home where it's safe.
When you mentioned the second plane hitting the second tower, that reminded me of World Trade Center 7, which is a whole nother can of worms. But for instance, the BBC said that it had already fallen
before it fell.
And the building is in the background behind the correspondent saying it has already fallen.
And it was not a time delay. It was a live relay.
10 or 15 minutes before it fell, and BBC's already calling it.
Yeah.
And the building's behind her as she says it.
Yeah, that I remember.
Yeah. But we've spent a lot of time on 9/11. So let's work our way backwards through some of the major wars that America has perpetrated pointlessly upon the world.
Well, let's go right to World War II and Pearl Harbor then.
Let's work our way backwards.
Okay,
from Vietnam. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was used to justify a massive...
Explain the incident.
A massive increase of American involvement in the Vietnam War, from just a few thousand advisors to hundreds of thousands of infantry troops.
Which my brother was comprised. He had a draft number, and he hated the paper route that my mom made him do for the LA Times so much, and he hated my mother so much
that he went to war.
That he enlisted
He preferred
early.
to go to
Yes.
kill yellow people.
And then he came back with the China White that spread through the San Fernando Valley, and there were warnings of it on AM radio, blah blah, but that's another matter. He did have a recommendation for rehab in his discharge papers, even though he was given some sort of honorary Civil War commendation called a I'll think of it in a minute, but it was something that Johnson made up to give the troops inspiration. He came home with this random ass decoration that should have been, according to him, in line with Medal of Honor. And that's when we knew he was, paranoid and partially...
Well, President Johnson's a real interesting case. I gotta find the right text and twang to do Johnson.
Don't spoil your bush with Johnson. Let's move it along.
Well, anyway, the Gulf of Tonkin incident was that I believe the NSA had alleged, they say they documented, that the North Vietnamese Navy had fired upon U.S. Navy ships in the South China Sea. But as Johnson said, I don't know, we could be shooting at whales for all we know. That was more black than LBJ.
That's all right. You give it a good go.
That was not good.
Moving along.
But this was later found to be an absolute fabrication. But it was used, and the government knew. And there's audio recordings that I tried pathetically to do of Johnson saying, we know it's false, but we don't care. We're going to use it as justification. Moving a little backwards in the 60s, we can go to Operation Northwoods. After Castro took power in Cuba and America flipped out.
You skipped right over JFK and RFK?
This is okay. They killed JFK, and before that was Northwoods. We could do JFK.
No, go ahead with Northwoods.
We'll finish Northwoods and we'll jump into JFK.
Yeah, I don't know Northwoods anyway.
Northwoods, they want to get rid of Castro. The Joint Chiefs of Staff they presented JFK with a memo of options, which included shooting down a civilian airliner and blaming it on Castro. In analyzing conspiracy theories, you have the documentation.
Wait a minute, are you laying out your method?
Yes.
Of evaluation?
There's a method behind my madness.
Please, do share.
Sometimes you got the receipts, you got the memos, you got the declassified documents, you got the voice recordings. Operation Northwoods is such a case because they have the Joint Chiefs of memorandum on it. And
tell us what happened. What fucking happened?
Nothing, because JFK said you're nuts. I think the Joint Chiefs of Staff might have been LeMay.
Okay, this is a rare event that not a lot of people know about. So I know LeMay because I dated a LeMay.
He's nuts. He's the model for Dr. Strangelove, the Stanley Kubrick classic.
Okay, but can you tell us what went down with Northwoods?
Nothing. JFK received the memo, thought that his entire military brass was insane, and did not act on it. JFK also had issues with the CIA, and they had issues with him. He told a neighbor in, I believe, Hyannis, or...
Did they have any neighbors in Hyannisport? Because they own fucking Hyannisport.
Well, he told, Bobby Kennedy vouched for it, I believe it was him, that JFK told a neighbor, I want to smash the CIA and scatter it to the winds in 1,000 pieces.
Oof.
That message was received loud and clear by the CIA.
That he shouldn't have said that out loud. He should have used his inside voice.
Yes, he said the quiet part out loud. You know, JFK is as big as 9/11, and after I figured out 9/11, I went straight into JFK. Yeah. And after arduous reading and research, I determined it was a combination of mob bosses like Santo Trafficante, CIA people like Clay Fury.
The Rat Pack.
Not the Rat Pack. Texas billionaires like Hunt, and anti-Castro Cubans who were training in southern Louisiana.
Well, Sinatra was in with the mob.
Yeah, Jack Ruby was tied into the mob too. And may have been an MK Ultra victim. MK Ultra is a CIA mind control program that probably also involves Sirhan.
Yeah, and they would know about this because it's been covered on Gaia TV a lot. So,
which I just learned about, so I'm going to check out Gaia TV.
Yeah.
So I did all this research. I figured out that's who killed JFK. And then I was in Dallas itself. Amtrak and Greyhound are both a block or two from Daly Plaza. I'm out to stretch my legs. I look at Daly Plaza. I say, there's no fucking way.
Yeah, the book depository at the wrong angle.
The book depository
up in like the 7th floor.
The book depository was behind the motorcade, and the Zapruder film is a shot from the front, from the grassy knoll.
Taking out a big chunk of his skull that Jackie went in her pink suit out on the back of the car to retrieve and put back on his head thinking, I don't know, that they could glue him back together. But anyway, doing what a wife does in a moment of crisis, I suppose.
Gathering your husband's brain. If you find one like that, she's a keeper. You might be too dead to enjoy her comradeship, but so we can keep working backward to World War II.
Well, go into RFK.
RFK.
The kitchen. It was in the kitchen.
Mike Tyson has a great podcast.
With a gun in... Yeah, and who was
Mike Tyson has a great podcast called Hot Boxing. And I really respect Mike Tyson's complete transformation from being a raging psychopath as a young fighter to being an evolved spiritual being now.
It could have been just damage to his basal ganglia and or frontal cortex from all of the boxing injuries. But, you know, discounting.
And he started smoking a lot of reefer and being a reefer entrepreneur. Whatever
it takes to get out the angry.
Whatever it took. He's a changed man. Yeah. And when he had Bobby Kennedy on last year, Bobby Kennedy said, I don't want to... Bobby Jr.
Who has a very tremulous voice and is difficult to listen to because we just did.
Yeah. He had a strong, clear voice until 40, and he had something attack his vocal cords. And so now he sounds like this, but it's not...
He sounds like Katharine Hepburn.
He sounds like Katharine Hepburn on Golden Pond. Anybody that loves Martin Short loves his impersonation of Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah, that's one of his best, really.
Yes, you know. I love Henry Fonda to death.
I love her.
But in his tremulous voice, he said, I didn't want to read the record. I assumed they had a trial. I didn't want to re-traumatize myself. But
Smart man.
But a friend, your dad got killed, the second in your family. But his friend told him, read the LAPD coroner report. And he did. And the conclusion he made was what the report stated, which was Sirhan shot from the front. There were 76 witnesses. Sirhan...
That's a lot of people to fit in a fucking kitchen.
Yeah, it was the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, which has now been torn down.
Of course.
And now it's a charter school. But Sirhan shot 8 bullets from the front. And 2 missed JFK. One hit a door jamb. I think one went through his suit shoulder or by his head, grazed his head, but it didn't hit him. And then he was tackled by 8 guys who couldn't dislodge the gun from his hand, which is another piece of evidence that it might have been MK Ultra, because when you're under mind control, you can have superhuman strength sometimes. And he was a small man. And when he was pinned down and his arm was pointing away from RFK, he discharged 6 more bullets, and all of those bullets are accounted for.
So that exceeded the capacity of the chamber with the number of shots fired.
I don't know.
And you said that the casings did not match the gub.
I didn't say that. It says here, it says gun. No, it says gub. Woody Allen reference. Google it.
Yeah.
But no, the coroner report said that the shots were from behind, from below shooting up, and that they were at point blank range and left powder footprints on the clothes and the body of RFK. And
yeah, on his skin.
On his skin. And the eyewitnesses said that this Filipino-American security guard from Lockheed, a prime member of the military-industrial complex.
Lockheed Martin, LMH ticker symbol.
I think they're
located in Southern California.
They were just Lockheed back then, but a security guard who was a CIA asset was transferred or changed jobs to the Ambassador Hotel security team 5 days before Bobby Kennedy was to speak, and he was seen behind Bobby Kennedy. And while the crowd was diverted by Sirhan and the gang tackle, he discharged, I think 4 times, into Bobby Kennedy, and
One which went through his shoulder pad.
yeah, his shoulder pad, and then I think 2 into his body, 3 into his body, and he collapsed, pulling off Cesar Chavez's clip-on tie. Bobby Kennedy brought Cesar Chavez into the labor movement, and he died. And
so this is why San Francisco reveres Cesar Chavez so much and has renamed, much of the town.
Yeah,
accordingly.
The 60s
used to be Army Street. Now
was a
Cesar
horrible wave of political assassinations.
MLK included.
JFK, we talked about a little bit. Bobby Kennedy, we just talked about. Malcolm X. There was a lot of FBI harassment, a lot of FBI infiltration into other black militant groups. Was it the African Liberation Army? I shouldn't speak if I don't know.
No, don't.
Yeah, but there was...
The Black Panthers were not well organized. They were ad hoc.
I disagree. They were very well organized and full of discipline and an example of mutual aid. And while we talk about Panthers, we need to talk about Chairman Fred Hampton, the charismatic...
You're high.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
I only took 3 mushroom bonbons. Ha! I didn't. But Chairman Fred Hampton was an articulate, intelligent, gorgeous, young black leader who was the chairman of the Chicago branch of the Black Panthers, and the Chicago Police Department gunned him down in his house asleep with his wife and his infant child.
Rude.